Disclaimer: this story is a dramatized narrative inspired by real-life experiences. Names and certain details have been changed to protect privacy. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday morning. The sun was shining, the road was quiet, and our car was packed with snacks, gifts, and laughter as we headed toward my parents' house for the big family reunion. My husband, Daniel, was behind the wheel, humming along to the radio. We'd been talking about how excited my mom would be to see us, especially since she hadn't met our little boy in months. Everything felt light, almost perfect until it happened. Out of nowhere, Daniel's face went pale. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. I noticed the change instantly. "Are you okay?" I asked, half concerned, half confused. He didn't answer right away. He just stared ahead for a moment like he'd seen something I couldn't. Then, in the quietest, most urgent voice, he said, "Turn the car around. Now." I blinked at him, stunned.
Why?
We're only 20 minutes away. But his eyes, wide, cold, almost fearful, told me he wasn't joking. "Just turn around, please," he insisted, his voice shaking. My mind was racing. Was there an accident ahead?
Did he feel sick?
Was something wrong with the car? I had no reason not to trust him, so I pulled over, swapped seats, and let him drive us back the way we came. The silence in the car was heavy, almost suffocating. I could feel his heartbeat in the way he kept glancing in the rearview mirror. And when I finally learned the reason, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, especially my parents. I thought I was heading to a reunion. I didn't know I was driving straight toward the truth. The drive back felt endless. My husband barely spoke, and when he did, it was about random, surface-level things, like asking if I wanted to stop for coffee or if the music was too loud. I could tell he was avoiding the real conversation. Every time I tried to press for answers, he would just say, "I'll explain later." His tone wasn't cold, but there was a finality to it, like he had already decided this wasn't the moment to talk. As the miles passed, my mind ran through every possibility. I thought about the last time we'd visited my parents. Everything had seemed fine on the surface. My mom fussed over the table setting, my dad cracked his usual dry jokes, and we all pretended life was normal. But there were little things too, things I had brushed off. Like the way my dad avoided making eye contact with Daniel that night, or how Daniel insisted on leaving earlier than planned, claiming he had an early meeting. I hadn't questioned it then. Now, I was starting to wonder if those moments were connected. We ended up pulling into a small diner off the highway, the kind of place with chipped coffee cups and faded photos on the walls. Daniel ordered 2 black coffees and sat across from me, staring down at his hands. I wanted to reach across the table and just demand the truth, but part of me was afraid of what I might hear. Finally, I asked, "Did you see something back there?" His eyes lifted to mine, and for a second, I thought he was going to answer. But instead, he said, I had a bad feeling. A really bad one." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. That didn't make sense. My husband isn't the type to turn the car around over a feeling. He's steady, logical, sometimes to a fault. I could tell this was more than just intuition. Something had triggered him. Something he wasn't ready to say out loud. We drove home after the coffee, the silence even heavier than before. When we got back, Daniel busied himself with unloading the car while I sat on the couch, trying to piece together the puzzle. My phone kept buzzing with texts from my mom. "Where are you? Are you running late?" But I didn't reply. I wasn't sure what to tell her. The whole afternoon, Daniel seemed restless. He kept checking the locks, glancing out the windows, and pacing the living room. Every sound outside made him pause, listening. It was unsettling, like he was waiting for something or someone. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to his breathing beside me. I thought about my childhood home, about the family I thought I knew. My parents had always seemed so ordinary, so harmless. But if Daniel was this shaken, there had to be a reason. The next morning, he finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't want to tell you yesterday," he said, "because I didn't want you to panic. But if I'm right about what I saw," he trailed off, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. My stomach nodded. I didn't know if I wanted him to finish that sentence, or if I was better off not knowing at all. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped together, his eyes fixed on the floor. I could see the conflict in him, like he was debating whether to pull me into whatever storm was brewing in his head. Finally, he said, "Yesterday, just before I told you to turn around, I saw someone." His voice was low, careful, like every word had weight. "Not just anyone. Someone I know you wouldn't expect to see anywhere near your parents' place." My mind raced. A neighbor? An old friend? But before I could ask, he shook his head. "I'm not ready to say who. Not until I'm sure. If I'm wrong, it's better you don't know." The way he said it made me feel both protected and frustrated. Protected, because he clearly thought the truth might hurt me. Frustrated, because he was holding the answers that could explain everything. All day, his words sat in my chest like a stone. I found myself going back over the past year, thinking about every visit, every conversation with my parents. There had been moments that didn't quite add up. Phone calls they ended quickly when I walked into the room, little changes in their routines they never explained, and times when Daniel seemed unusually tense around them. I had chalked it all up to stress or bad timing. Now, I wasn't so sure. In the afternoon, while Daniel was in the shower, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother, Jake. His message was short, "Call me. It's important." Something about it made my heart skip. When I called, his voice was tight. "Did you make it to Mom and Dad's yesterday?" I told him no, that we'd turn back. There was a pause, and then he said, "Good." His relief was almost palpable, and that scared me more than anything Daniel had said. Why would that be good? I pressed, but Jake hesitated. "I can't explain over the phone. Just be careful. And keep an eye on Daniel." Then he hung up before I could ask another question. That night, I tried to act normal, but my mind was spinning. Two people I trusted, my husband and my brother, were both warning me in their own way. And neither of them would tell me why. It was like they knew something about my family that I didn't, and they were circling around it without letting me in. Daniel barely touched his dinner. He kept glancing at his phone, as if expecting a message. Every time it buzzed, he would check it immediately, and then set it down without a word. I caught a glimpse once. It looked like an unknown number. Later, when he stepped outside to take a call, I stood by the window, trying to hear his voice. His tone was low but urgent. I caught fragments. "No, she doesn't know yet, and I can't risk it." The wind carried away the rest. When he came back inside, he tried to smile, but his eyes betrayed him. I went to bed that night with the same question repeating in my head. What could be so dangerous, so serious, that my own family would keep it from me? And more importantly, why did it feel like the danger was getting closer? The following morning, the air in the house felt heavier, as if every word we didn't say was pressing down on us. Daniel was already awake, pacing near the kitchen window, sipping coffee he hadn't even bothered to sweeten like he usually did. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. I wanted to demand answers, but there was something in his posture, tense, almost defensive, that made me hesitate. Instead, I tried to keep my voice calm. "Daniel, you can't keep me in the dark. Whatever you saw, whatever this is about, I need to know." He set his mug down and finally looked at me. "If I tell you now, you might do something reckless. And I can't have you walking into this blind." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. 3 short taps, deliberate, like the person knew exactly who they were here for. Daniel froze, his eyes darting toward the sound. "Don't answer it," he whispered, stepping toward me. But curiosity overpowered caution. I peeked through the blinds and felt my chest tighten. It was Jake. Daniel's jaw clenched when he saw him. "We shouldn't talk here," Jake said the second I opened the door. He looked like he had driven through the night, rumpled shirt, dark circles under his eyes. "Both of you, grab your things. We need to go somewhere safe." Safe from what? The question burned on my tongue, but Jake was already scanning the street like he was expecting someone to follow him. Daniel didn't argue. He just grabbed his keys and motioned for me to move quickly. The tension between the two of them was like static in the air, unspoken but charged. We drove in silence for miles, the city falling away into back roads and open fields. Finally, Jake pulled into an old, nearly empty parking lot by a closed-down gas station. The place was so quiet, the only sound was the wind rattling an old sign. Jake got out first, motioning for us to follow. "I didn't want to tell you until I was sure," Jake began, his voice low. "But yesterday, someone was at Mom and Dad's house. Someone neither of you should ever be near." He glanced at Daniel, who gave the smallest nod, confirming they were on the same page. My pulse quickened.
Who?
I asked. Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a folded photograph from his pocket and held it out. I recognized the background instantly. It was my parents' backyard. But the man in the photo was a stranger. His face was hard, his eyes cold, and something about him made my stomach twist. "That man," Jake said, "is dangerous. And if he's with Mom and Dad, it means things are a lot worse than we thought." Before I could even process his words, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went even paler than it had on the road yesterday. "We have to move now," he said sharply. "They know we're here." In that instant, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Whoever they were close, and we were running out of time. Daniel didn't wait for either of us to react. He grabbed my arm, steering me back toward the car with a grip that was firm but shaking. Jake scanned the lot one last time before sliding into the passenger seat, his eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. The silence in those first few moments was deafening. Every sound outside felt magnified, every shadow suspicious. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere they won't think to look," Daniel said, keeping his gaze locked on the road. "But we need to stay moving." I glanced at Jake, hoping for more clarity, but he was staring down at the photograph still clutched in his hand. He finally spoke, his tone grim. "That man isn't just dangerous. He's been missing from the official records for years. No one knows where he's been, but if he's with Mom and Dad now, it's because they want it that way." His words cut through me. "Are you saying my parents know him?" Jake hesitated before nodding. "Not just know him. They trust him. And that's the problem." Before I could demand an explanation, Daniel slowed the car, eyes narrowing at the rearview mirror. "We're being followed." I twisted in my seat and caught a glimpse of a dark SUV a few car lengths behind us. Its tinted windows made it impossible to see who was inside, but it matched our turns perfectly. My pulse hammered in my ears. Daniel took a sudden right down a side road lined with tall trees, pushing the car faster. The SUV followed. Jake's jaw tightened. "We need to split up. It's the only way to throw them off." The words barely registered before another realization hit me. Splitting up meant being alone, without answers, and I wasn't ready for that. But the SUV closed the distance, and Daniel made the decision for us. He pulled into a narrow gravel path that led to an abandoned farmhouse, killing the engine. "We'll go through the woods. They won't risk chasing on foot." The air outside was cold, biting at my skin as we ran. My shoes crunched against the frozen leaves, each sound feeling too loud. Daniel kept glancing back, urging me to move faster, while Jake scouted ahead. I didn't know where we were going, only that we couldn't stop. Halfway through the dense stretch of trees, we came across an old shed, its door barely hanging on. Daniel motioned for me to get inside, whispering, "Stay quiet." But just as we slipped in, Jake's phone buzzed. He answered quickly, keeping his voice low, but the few words I caught made my blood run cold. "They found the house," he said into the phone. "The photo's gone." I didn't know who he was talking to, but when he hung up, his face was pale. "This isn't just about that man," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "There's something else, something Mom and Dad have been hiding for decades. And now, they're making sure no one finds out." Somewhere outside, the sound of tires on gravel drew closer. Whoever was following us had caught up, and this time, there would be no turning around. The sound of tires crunching on gravel grew louder until it felt like the air itself was vibrating. Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, urging me to stay still. Through the narrow crack in the shed door, I saw the dark SUV pull up, headlights slicing through the trees. Two men stepped out. One of them was the man from the photograph. Even at a distance, his presence was chilling, his gaze scanning the woods like he knew exactly where we were. Jake leaned close, whispering so softly I barely heard him. "If they find us, we don't run, we stall. There's someone coming to meet us." His words gave me no comfort, but before I could ask who, the man from the photo called out in a deep, calm voice, "You can come out now. We don't have to make this harder than it needs to be." Daniel's grip on my arm tightened. I could feel his heartbeat pounding through his fingers. Slowly, the footsteps drew closer until shadows passed right in front of the shed. Then, silence. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought they'd walked away. But the door suddenly swung open, flooding the small space with pale daylight. The man's eyes landed on me first, then Daniel, and finally Jake. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was almost familiar. "You must be her," he said, and the way he spoke made it sound like we'd met before, even though I knew I had never seen him in my life. Daniel stepped between us. "Stay away from her." The man didn't react to the threat. Instead, he looked at me again. "Your parents never told you, did they? That I'm your uncle?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I almost laughed from the absurdity of it, but Jake's tense posture told me this wasn't a lie. "Uncle," I repeated, my voice breaking. "That's impossible. I would have known." "You would have," he said, "if they hadn't erased me from your life. They didn't want you knowing what I was involved in. But now they need me." Before I could respond, a sharp sound cracked through the air, car doors slamming, voices shouting. A second vehicle appeared, this one unmarked, and 3 people in plain clothes rushed out. One of them flashed a badge. The man, my so-called uncle, didn't fight. He just smiled at me, a slow, unsettling smile, as the agents pulled him toward their car. One of the agents approached us, speaking quickly. "He's been under investigation for years. We had reason to believe your parents were harboring him. We couldn't move until we were sure." My stomach churned. My parents, my quiet, ordinary parents, had been protecting a fugitive. When the agents drove away with him, the woods fell silent again. I felt numb, like my mind couldn't catch up to what had just happened. Daniel wrapped his arms around me, but his voice was low when he said, "This isn't over." I looked at him, startled.
He met my eyes.
"Your parents, they didn't just hide him. They hid why." And in that moment, I realized the truth we'd uncovered today was only the beginning of something much darker. We drove back in near silence, the events of the day settling over us like a thick fog. My mind kept replaying that moment, his eyes locking on mine, the way he said he was my uncle, and the unsettling smile that followed. The pieces didn't fit neatly, but they were enough to change everything I thought I knew about my family. I kept thinking about my parents, wondering what they were doing right now, and if they knew he'd been taken. Part of me wanted to call them, to demand the truth, but another part wasn't ready to hear it. Jake sat in the back seat, leaning his head against the window, his usual guarded nature even more pronounced. "I knew about him," he said quietly. "Not everything, but enough to understand why Mom and Dad kept it from you. They wanted to protect you from his world, from the things he'd done." He paused, then added, "But somewhere along the way, they started protecting him too." The truth stung more than I expected. My parents had raised us on values, honesty, loyalty, doing the right thing, and yet, here they were, hiding a fugitive in plain sight. Daniel reached over and took my hand as he drove, his voice steady but gentle. "Sometimes people protect what they love, even if it's wrong. But love doesn't erase the damage." Back at our house, the air felt heavy with unspoken words. Jake stayed for coffee, his way of making sure we weren't left alone with too many questions swirling in our heads. Eventually, he left, promising to share more when he could. Daniel and I sat together in the quiet living room, the clock ticking loudly in the background. The next morning, I woke to a text from my mom. Just 4 words. "We need to talk." My heart skipped. There was no apology, no explanation, just a simple statement that carried the weight of decades. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't sure I wanted to have that conversation so soon. Later that day, Daniel suggested we go for a drive, not to escape this time, but to clear our heads. We passed through streets we'd driven countless times before, yet everything felt different now. The world looked the same, but I had changed. My understanding of my parents, my family history, and even my own identity had shifted. In the following weeks, pieces of the truth trickled in. My uncle had been involved in things I couldn't fully wrap my mind around, things that had forced my parents to choose between family loyalty and the law. They chose him, and in doing so, they risked everything. Knowing this didn't erase the love I had for them, but it added a layer of distance I couldn't ignore. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if turning the car around that day was fate or just instinct. Either way, it saved us from walking into a situation we weren't ready for. Daniel's quick decision had kept us safe, but it had also opened a door to secrets I could never close again. I still haven't decided how to respond to my mom's message. Maybe one day I'll sit across from her and hear her side. Maybe I'll understand her choices, or maybe I won't. But I know one thing for sure. Family is never as simple as it seems, and sometimes the truth changes everything.